book that's just been released, 1 month in Tohoku. So please stick around. We will be right back. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. It's Tuesday, November 24th, and today we're talking about fantastic stories of recovery and connection with people. I really enjoyed reading this book. Thank you so much for writing it, Caroline.
Thank you.
And thanks for joining. You're in the UK now, right?
I am. It's 8 o'clock in the morning here, so I'm not quite awake, but I'll do my best.
Yeah, thank you for making a time adjustment for us. It's nice to have you here. Now, you were living in Japan for a long time, of course,
Yeah, I lived in Tokyo for 15 years.
and you were an entrepreneur, you were a writer, you wrote a bunch of books, you had different businesses. I think we may have met one time when I was in Tokyo, maybe at the Pink Cow or something. But
Yeah,
yeah, many,
used to go
many
to the Pink
years ago.
Cow a lot. Yeah, and
Yeah.
have a lot of events there. And yeah, Tracy's place. That's amazing. I love the Pink Cow.
Yeah, wonderful place. So how did this come about? Because you, of course, your experience that you talk about in the book is amazing, and it's so significant that you're releasing it now as we're getting to the 10-year anniversary. Was there any kind of impetus that made you release it now, or?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to release it to mark the 10-year anniversary. I felt that things that had happened over the last 10 years, and particularly in Oshika, the place where I go to, the way that they've developed over the last 10 years, I wanted them to be remembered. And it's quite a forgotten place. A lot of people, lots of Japanese people haven't even heard of Oshika. So I wanted to do something that would meant they would never be forgotten. I wanted to put all of that down on paper. And I did write blogs, and still every time I go back there now, I still write blogs when I'm there. But I just felt like that they deserved more than that, and it felt like it was the right time to bring this out before the 10-year anniversary. And actually, it wasn't supposed to come out until after Christmas, but because of coronavirus, it actually ended up coming out a lot earlier.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about how you start the book in a really funny way that I didn't expect it to start that way, and I won't give it away, but it's quite funny. So if people are expecting this book to be really sad the whole time and really dry, you will be surprised because there is some really funny stories, really heartwarming. So basically, you start the story in Saipan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, just very quickly, your point about the beginning of it being really unexpected. Everybody says that, and I was in two minds as to whether to start it like that, to be honest, because it's such a ridiculous beginning to a book that is about something really, really serious. But as you notice, um, as you notice through the book, there are actually quite a few little stories like that through there, and because that was very deliberate, because life on Oshika and the people of Oshika, it is not all doom and gloom. It is, of course, something absolutely terrible happened 10 years ago, but one of the reasons I fell in love with the people on Oshika was because of their spirit and their sense of humor and their ability to just laugh in the face of whatever is going on. And I really wanted to capture that. And I wanted the book to be kind of reflect them. So that's why there are really serious, deeply moving moments in the book. But then there's something absolutely ridiculous, which you just think, how did we go from that to that?
Yeah.
So it's very deliberate. And yes, you're right. That is the book is like that all the way through. Going back to Saipan. So I was actually I wasn't, even though I was living in Tokyo at the time. On the actual day of March 11th, I was in Saipan, I'd gone away for a week. I was writing a book for Japanese men about dating foreign women. And I'd gone there, taken myself off to Saipan for a week, just completely immersed myself in writing this book. So I wasn't even in Tokyo at the time.
Yeah. I found it really interesting, like that whole perspective. And I was living in Japan at the same time in 2011 when that happened. And so a lot of what you're talking about as someone who's living in Japan, but not actually in Japan, and then you actually had to evacuate yourself and make sure that you were in a safe place. And then that perspective from the outside, and then it seemed to really connect with you in a stronger way than maybe if you were in Japan, you would have reacted in a different way. It was really interesting perspective, I think, that beginning in Saipan.
I think you that's a really good point actually, and I wonder I wonder if I'd done would I have done anything differently if I'd actually been in Tokyo on the day. I wonder if you're right, because being in Saipan, there was that feeling of the helplessness was overwhelming. I just felt I'm not there, I can't do anything. My Japanese skills at that time were not very good either. So and so there were those things going on, and obviously I was overwhelmed with this concern and feeling like I needed to do something to help, and then at the same time being evacuated and being in a really terrifying situation, where you were watching on a screen what was happening to the country that you loved, but then at the same time you're on high ground yourself, not knowing where you are by yourself, and the whole island is evacuated. So it was a very odd, it was a very odd night. Very The whole experience was very strange. But I just spent the entire week just thinking I must do something to help. After that, I hated not being in Japan for that day. To be honest, a lot of people think that. And I met some other people who weren't in Japan for whatever reason on that day as well, and we all agreed that we weren't relieved to not be there. People assumed, our families and things assumed, oh, you must have been so pleased that you so relieved that you weren't there, and we were like, no, it wasn't like that at all.
Yeah. I think it's, pretty traumatic whether you were here or not. But for me, reading that part and realizing, because I was in Japan, we were also trying to help people communicate who were in Thailand, who couldn't find their friends and family. So we have a local website. We were trying to help people make connections in that way. But then immediately you went to the UK and you started visiting schools and talking about Japan and trying to collect donations from lists of things that you had found out people needed. And so that whole next part of the book is your work in the UK, which is really fantastic and powerful. Do you want to talk about
Thank
that a
you.
little bit?
Yeah, I thought I can't do anything. I can't. What do I do? Do I get back to Tokyo? I can't. The idea of going up into a disaster zone for me at that point was just ridiculous. I'm a normal person. I'm not trained in doing anything like this. Why on earth would I go up there? I'm just going to be in the way. So it didn't occur to me that I'd be able to go and help there. So I thought, right, I'll go in the other direction and I'll go to the UK. Because there I know I can help there. I can speak, and in fact I can speak quite well. So I'll use that skill and I'll go out and give these talks, collect donated items from these school kids, in exchange for the talks. And I got a list. I found out from people who were brave enough to go up in those very early days, and I got lists of things that were actually needed, because I feel quite strongly that in these situations it's so quick for us to just, oh, we'll just give anything. But actually you have to be very careful when you're donating items and make sure that you don't get things to any disaster zone that aren't actually needed. So would collect these things, go to these schools, and I just went from school to school, literally several talks in a day, going from one city to another, all over, mostly the West Country, but also some in London as well. And the response was incredible, and it wasn't something I expected at all. I didn't feel very connected to England. I didn't have to be honest, I didn't have a lot of warm feelings towards England at that time. You know, Japan was my home. Um, so I was really taken aback by the response from British people, the kindness, the generosity, the warmth, the concern that these, it was mostly schools, so these kids had for a country that they didn't know much about. They didn't learn, you know, we don't learn much about Japan in the British education system. So they didn't know much about it at all, but they had so much compassion. It was so moving.
Yeah. It was really powerful. That whole section I found really interesting. And my one of my things that I'm still teaching is marketing. And to me, it was like you were doing Japan destination branding. You were doing Japan branding as part of your efforts to raise money or supplies for Tohoku. You were also like sharing your love of Japan and getting people interested in Japan. And that was so, it's like a really an ambassador kind of role. I love it.
That's not, that's lovely that you say that, because that actually was one of my motivations for doing it. I thought, I know what images the British media are going to be splashing all over the paper after this disaster. I knew it. I knew exactly what they were going to do, and I thought, I don't want young people in England growing up and with, you know, those images we have of a country when we're very young, they stay in our minds for a very long time. And I thought, I don't want these British kids to have this image of Japan as being this country that's completely fallen apart and destroyed by this huge tsunami. So I wanted to go there and show them photos of sumo wrestlers and Mount Fuji and beautiful sunrises and sunsets and kimonos and all the lots and lots of different kinds of things about Japan that I loved. And I just collected loads of photos on my computer, made a slideshow, and showed these. And because I wanted to really try to counteract those images, I wanted these kids to think, gosh, Japan is a country one day I want to go and visit. I wanted them to go home and say, can we go to Japan on holiday? And that was a big response after that. Actually, a lot of kids, and sometimes I meet people now, they're in their 20s and they were kids when I did this 10 years ago. Oh, I remember this lady came and she talked to us about Japan and showed these amazing photos. And I think that's great. They remember the tsunami, but what's really stuck in their mind are these images of a country that's really interesting place to go to. That's really interesting that you picked up on that. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. And the whole idea of accountability also comes up. How you wanted to have a list of things people actually needed, right? That was part one. And then you went to Tohoku and you came back and you showed the kids this is how your donations were used. This is how the funds that you guys gave me helped these people. And you talk a little bit about how in the world, when we donate to various causes, we don't usually have that chance to see how our donation is utilized. And that's really great for the kids to see that their efforts really paid off in the real world and really affected real people. So that was also a magical part of it.
Thank you. That's been a running theme over the last 10 years, actually. I've always felt so strongly about reporting back to people, even if they donate a small amount of money. I've got my email list. I always email people directly and say, by the way, here's an update on something that you donated money for. And I think that the people who have donated money to projects that I've run, I think they've really liked that. They've liked the way that I've done that, and it's just been really, really important to me, that accountability. And I'm not a charity as well, so I did look at one point whether do I set up a charity or not, and I thought, you know what, I don't actually, because if you have a charity, you're running a business, and then some of that money will end up going on expenses to keep that charity running. And that was another decision that I made very early on, that I wanted absolutely nothing of what anybody donated to me to go on anything. And that included paperwork for running a charity. So I didn't do that. So I had to then be accountable in another way. It was another reason that I made sure that everybody who gave money always knew exactly what happened to it.
Yeah, that's so important. I think in this day and age with nonprofits that we have to have that transparency and accountability and show people how their funds are being used because people are really skeptical, right? Another thing I thought was great about all the school visits was you're teaching the kids how to be empathetic. And you're teaching them about things, not just about Tohoku. Like you were talking about going to the economics class, talking about Japanese economics, talking about Japanese transportation, and then you inspired some of the kids to do a sleep at your school, kind of in empathy of the kids in Tohoku who had to sleep in their school.
Yeah,
But that gave them an experience of their own for, I mean,
yeah.
raising money, but also thinking, wow, it is kind of hard to sleep at your school or something. So it kind of went beyond just talking at them. You activated something in the schools, which was really powerful.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I trained originally. I was a primary school teacher. My whole, childhood dream was to be a primary school teacher, and because I ended up going in the entrepreneur world and running my own business, I didn't teach for very long at all, actually. And but I did love it. The short period of time I taught, I did love it many years ago. So going back into these classrooms and finding all these different ways to teach kids to nurture their spirits, I suppose, in a way that wasn't academic as such. It was really rewarding for me as well, I have to say, as much as the kids. Although that sleepover, what was there, 60 kids, all under the age of 11, and myself and a few of the teachers slept there as well with them. They're really noisy, 60 kids all whispering through the night. But I mean, it's an experience. I can't say I want to repeat that, but it was amazing, and the kids were amazing. And in the morning, the teachers coming and sorry, the parents coming and having breakfast with the kids. And I gave a speech to the parents in the morning, but I was still in my pajamas, and it, it was just the whole thing. It was pretty amazing. It was an amazing experience, actually.
That's great. I love it. You have this quote in your book. You said, I loved how children seem to be so in tune with other people's emotions and so free with the very human instinct to comfort others and make others' unhappiness go away. It's really powerful.
Yeah, they are though, aren't they? Kids are so pure in the way they don't want other people to be in pain. And most kids anyway, they want it to go away. They want to hug their friends. They want to, you talk to very young children about bullying, and they immediately they hate the thought of it, and they want everything to be okay. And somewhere along the world in our lives, I don't know, it goes, doesn't it? It's sad. It's not for everybody, obviously, but some people they start then inflicting pain, don't they, and being horrible, but really our deep true natures, I think we just want everybody's pain to go away, don't we?
Yeah. And for some reasons, some people grow up and lose that. And we have to learn how to hold on to it, right? It's
Yeah.
so wonderful. Another thing that was really amazing in the book, and not only in the UK but in Japan, this happened to you a lot as well, which is such a credit to you and your entrepreneurial drive, I think, is your ability to collaborate with businesses and individuals and schools and supermarkets to get all the donations organized, but also you collaborated with a storage center, with a truck company, and a Virgin, was it, who delivered
Yeah,
everything?
they were incredible. Virgin were
Unbelievable.
absolutely amazing. Yeah. Well,
So Hitachi was the truck, is that right?
yeah. In England, so in order to get around England, I had to have a vehicle, and the idea of collecting these donated items, it had to go in something, so it needed to be some kind of van. So Hitachi lent me this van, and it was, I mean, I couldn't have done it without them. They were amazing, and I'm still in touch with them now. And this is 10 years ago. The people who were working there then are still there now, and I've still kept them informed and said, this, you remember when you let me that truck to do the van to do that, this is what happened in the end. It led to £170,000 donations, and it led to a relationship with a community of people that is still very close today. And I think the collaborating with people, partly I think it's because I can be a little bit persistent with things. Partly I think it's passion. Actually, persistence and passion is if I'm passionate about anything, and anybody who's worked with me would say this, if I'm passionate about something, I am 110% going to do it to the best of my ability. I'll be, the best cheerleader for somebody who needs it, and I get really, really into whatever I'm doing, because I just think, well, if we get one life, we get one opportunity to do things, and you may as well do them wholeheartedly than half-heartedly. Put your absolute best into them. So I think people pick up on that. I like meeting people who are like that. It makes me feel like, oh, I want to be part of that. And then if you put a persistent and a passionate person in front of kind of connected with something that inspires compassion in others, people want to be a part of it. They want to support them. And I had, living in Tokyo for 15 years and being part of the business community there, I had a very big network of businesses and entrepreneurs, fellow entrepreneurs. I also did a lot of work with the international schools, so I had a big network there. So I had these quite, big networks of people from my business life that were also interested then in what was going on in Oshika and the things that I was doing up there. So, and they wanted to be part of it. And people, I mean, at that time, particularly the early years after the disaster, everybody wanted to help. Everybody was looking for a way to help. So people like me and other people who were doing other projects like Playground of Hope. I mean, Michael Anna set up Playground of Hope. It's just a fantastic organisation. And what we were doing, people who were helping after the disaster, well, we were giving ways for people to help who couldn't go up there, couldn't physically do something, but they had money, they had contacts themselves, they had things they could donate, and people were very, very keen to help. We were just channels. And I always said that I felt like I was just channeling what other people wanted to be able to do or to give.
Yeah. No, it's really important to remember that you don't have to listen to the naysayers. Like, I love that about your book, right? Like, people kept saying, oh, they don't need your help, or they don't need socks. And you're like, listen, this is what I've heard. I'm just going to go for it, and just duck and dive around the naysayers, duck and dive around the hurdles that were put in your way in the UK as well as in Japan. I mean, both sides. So that was really impressive.
I've always had the attitude of if you don't want to be part of this, if you don't want to donate, if you don't want to spread the word, that's okay. It's fine. Don't donate. Don't be part of it. Rather than picking things apart and complaining about them and saying, negative things about it, or stopping other people from doing that. Just say, if you don't want to do it, just don't do it. It's fine. I'm not trying to persuade anybody. And I've never, with this, when there's been money needed for a project on Oshika, my whole approach to it has been, I'm just going to write about it. I'm going to blog about it. I'm going to share it within my network. And if somebody's interested in helping, then that's fine. And if they're not, then that's not, then that's fine too. But I haven't been the kind of person with this who's been, picking up the phone and saying, please give some money to this. I've tried not to pressure anybody. I've just tried to explain to people, these are things you can do if you want to. And if you don't want to, yeah, fine, just go away and do what you want to do. Then that's fine too.
Yeah, that's great.
Because people like being negative about stuff like this. People like being negative about it.
Tell me about it. everything that I talk about, there is a very easy excuse not to do it. Every guest that I have on, there's somebody listening who says that's too hard. I can't do that, or that's for whatever reason I can't do that. So I'm just trying to keep putting what you guys say as your message, what you've done, keep putting it out there, and eventually somebody out there is going to be like, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I'm inspired. I'm going to do it. Yeah.
And if you can't, just support people who can, because
Yes.
there are a lot of reasons
Yes.
why
Yes.
people can't do this. They might have like a whole load of kids they're responsible for. They might have a really really important job, that something like in the healthcare system, or that's what I mean when I say an important job. They're doing something like that. So moving away from that job, there are lots of reasons why some people can't do those things. Maybe it's just not in their personality. Absolutely. And that's fine. It's fine. Then support people who can.
Yeah. And try really hard not to be pressuring people who don't want to do something. Just really encourage people who do stuff. And that's a powerful thing in itself, right?
The way when I've been on Oshika, there've been times, because it's been very lonely sometimes when I've been on Oshika. I'm usually roughing it there and on my own, and don't always sleep very well there. And I'm constantly worrying, not so much these days, but particularly in the early years, constantly worrying, am I upsetting somebody? Am I doing something wrong? And so people would send private messages from Tokyo who would just say, just checking in, making sure that, people I don't even know very well, saying, are you okay? You're doing a great job there. And the encouragement from that, I think people underestimate how much a lovely message can really impact someone, perhaps when they're questioning what they're doing. And I question myself all the time.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really powerful part of the book. And I think if people are thinking this book will only be interesting to someone who's worried about Tohoku or in Japan, that is so not true. There's so many truths, human truths of your experience in this book that anybody can relate to. Like I love that part when you're first there in Oshika and you're talking about, I kept asking people, what do you need? Just tell me, what do you need? I write it down. Can I take your address? I'm going to tell my network, is that okay? They're going to send it, and you're just asking, what do you need? And then at night, you were saying, what can I do? What can I do? And feeling kind of anxious and insecure about it. Even though you're doing so much, you were still anxious. It's amazing.
I was. I worried so much. I was constantly worrying about upsetting people or doing the wrong thing, or, and it came from, I had such a sincere desire to just not to be a burden and to do whatever I possibly could to help. It was so overwhelming. But at the same time, this constant, I'm doing something wrong, doing something. I wish I just wasted so much time thinking like that. But it came from a good place. I do look back at myself now and I think you really didn't need to worry. Nobody was upset with what you were doing there. I mean, I don't know if you read the bit about the laundry, but I could even do that in the village and nobody minded. So nobody was upset with anything I was doing there. So,
it was really interesting to me, because there's certain parts where you're really conscious of not looking like you're being too pushy. Like, even you've got these coats and you want people to come and choose the coat, so then you go outside to give them some time to choose on their own, because you don't want to make them feel uncomfortable. But then you say, but they're all chatting and laughing and they don't care. But then in other parts, like when you're supposed to sign a form and wait in line to give your donations officially, and you're like, forget about that, I'm gonna do it directly. So you have, like, certain things that you're like, I'm really scared, I'm worried about, and then other things you're like, no, I'm not doing that, I'm gonna go around.
Yeah. I think, that's a good point. I can be like, I do both things, actually. You're right. It depends who I'm dealing with. And I think okay, this might, the closer I was to people I felt, this is all very much on an instinct level here. The closer I felt I was to people who had suffered deep trauma, the more sensitive I was and the less direct I was. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yep.
Absolutely. But I think if I was in an environment or dealing with somebody who, and it was all just on a sense, who I sensed was okay with me being really direct, then I would be like, no, I'm just, this is going to happen. So, but I think that's where my I have like a sliding scale of directness, maybe. Yeah.
No, I after living in Japan for many years, I completely 100% get that. You saw certain officialdom which you knew was not helping the people, but was actually in the way of helping the people, and you found
Yeah.
ways around that, right? And then
Yeah.
when it came to actual communication with people, who local people, you were so respectful and maybe a little bit too careful and realized you didn't have to do that. But that was very good that you did that in the beginning, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. That's very insightful. Yeah.
Well, there's so many great stories from your book. I loved it. So
Oh,
maybe
thank
we
you.
should step back a little bit. Let's introduce the area of Otsuka where you ended up really connecting and really helping. Tell us a bit about it, can you?
Yeah, so Oshika Hanto, it's a very remote. Hanto means peninsula. I don't know how many of your viewers are Japanese speakers or not. So the Oshika Peninsula, it's a very remote peninsula. It has Kinkasan, which is an island, which is what considered to be one of the most sacred places in Tohoku. It's a shrine complex island at the very edge of the peninsula, and it's said that if you visit this island on 3 consecutive years, that you'll never have a money worry again. And from that, the end of the peninsula and Kinkasan, you can stand there and you can look out directly to where the tsunami came. And that point there is the closest part of Japan to the center of the earthquake. And it was the first part of Japan to be hit by the tsunami. Oshika was completely cut off from the mainland for a week after the tsunami, so nobody could get there at all. Nobody could get on or off the peninsula. I think there was one pregnant woman that was lifted by helicopter, but they were basically completely stuck on this peninsula for a week. And people who had family working on the mainland, they didn't know whether they were alive or not. And some people eventually walked their way. There's a very small bridge, which you between the part of the mainland and the peninsula. You used to only be able to get to the peninsula by boat many years ago, but it has a coastal road now. And this peninsula is a series of very tiny fishing villages, really like 150 people kind of size of communities. And the community the village that I kind of became very close to is called Oharahama. And this village, the people that live there are samurai descendants. So Date actually discovered Oharahama when he was he was pursuing some samurai he was fighting with, and these samurai went and hid in the forests on the peninsula. And when he found them in the forest, he also found this village, this beautiful place, and he decided to make it his summer home. And he spared the samurai their lives on the condition that they stayed permanently in this village and they looked after his summer home there. And the descendants, the people who live in that village now, are descendants from those samurai. So it's a beautiful story.
That is. And I'm showing a picture now that you took of the bay from up above. And from the book, you were talking about some tourists were talking about the water completely drained out before the
Right, so
tsunami came.
I can't see the picture that you're showing, but if it's the one I think it is, then you've got the island. You're on the mainland. I took the photo from the mainland. That's from Gobanshou Koen, which is the highest point on Oshika. If anybody goes there, you get an incredible view, and it's a panoramic view as well. And that whole bay just completely, the water completely disappeared from there, so you could see the bottom of the ocean there.
Yeah, that's just incredible. And the, of course, devastation that basically, in the book you talk about only 4 people died, was it? But everybody lost their home in that area.
Yeah, the village where I stay, yeah. So there were actually 2 people, that village. There were other people that died in that area, but of that particular village of 150 people, Ohara, only 2. They were very lucky. Only 2 people died, but everybody knew to go to high ground, and nearly everybody lost their homes. There probably, was it 4 or 5 homes out of the whole village remained.
And it was really powerful part of the book when you're talking about everybody who lives there, because it really is out on the peninsula. They really are next to the sea, right there at the
Oh yeah,
Oshika, right? And all the
yeah,
fishermen knew to go further out to sea if they were on the sea when it happened. And everybody
yeah,
in the village knew to go up to higher ground.
yeah.
So even though they were directly hit, people knew how to handle it. But yet, the government told them that they're not allowed to rebuild, right?
Yes. So yeah, so they know their kind of attitude with all of it is they understand the sea, they know the sea, they respect the sea. They know what they need to do if there's an earthquake, and it's just part of life for them. Tsunamis this isn't the first tsunami that's happened in this area, so so they know what to do. Um, so everybody go, either if you're on the water, you go further out, and if you're on land, you go up. So and then afterwards, they're not allowed to build in this particular area. They weren't allowed to build anything where you sleep on any land where water came. So so nobody was allowed to build any homes at all. That you could put other things there, but you weren't allowed to build anywhere that anyone would sleep. That was the rule, as far as that water came. So for years, nobody knew what to do with that land, because some of this land was, there are a few people who owned an awful lot of land there. And there wasn't, the compensation for that land was not forthcoming for quite a while. There were a lot of discussions about how people could get compensated for that. And in some cases, there were people who had perhaps a brand new house that they just built on that land, and they were still paying the mortgage on, and they didn't have their mortgage. They still had to pay their mortgage, even though they couldn't build on that land, or they couldn't live in their home because it wasn't there anymore. So the rules were all, it was very, very tricky. So everybody lived in temporary housing. They were told for 6 months in Ohara that they would be living in temporary housing, and it ended up being 6 years.
It's incredible. And you were talking to Seiji Yoshimura in the beginning when you first went up there, and he's talking about he was helping in Kobe, and he's a disaster expert. And he was introducing you when you went up the second time to all the frustrations that the people who were the local fishermen, that they wanted to be there. They wanted to stay there. That was their home. They knew how to live there. They knew how to live off the water. That was their way to survive. That for generations, that was their heritage, right? And
Yeah,
how
and
it was so frustrating because the government didn't see it that way, right?
no, Seiji was brilliant actually. When in the early days, when I before I had relationships with people and before I could communicate properly, him and Hiroyuki was another chap that was helping there, and they were just fantastic. Um, and they yeah, they couldn't they oh, I've just lost my train of thought there. So yeah, so the government said, because Oshika was quite a remote place, the government didn't always pay a lot of attention to Oshika anyway. It was one of these places that wasn't getting a lot of investment, and they were losing a lot of population. Actually, there wasn't a lot of things going on for the young people, so there's a very strong elderly population there, and there has been the sense over a long period of time that there's a question over the future. What is the future in that kind of area? So then you get a huge disaster happening and everything's destroyed. It's not going to be the top of the list of priorities for a government to put money into. And the people of Oshika, generally, they're not going to make a big fuss. They're quite happy with they like their quiet, very tight community lives. They're not people who are used to fighting with the government for getting their needs met. They're not like that. They live these beautiful, close, connected village lives together. So they're not in a position where they feel comfortable arguing, and they're not used to having a lot of attention from the government anyway. So they were just forgotten, and the government would probably have rather they just went to live in a city somewhere. So one of the cities that was getting investment, that was recovering, maybe they had distant relatives there or something, maybe they could go and live there. But they didn't want to. They want to stay there, even though this has happened. They want to stay there. This is their home. They've lived there for some of the families have lived there for 400 years. They've taken care of Date's shrine for 400 years. They still take care of it now. They want to stay there. So it was a fight for them to get the support to enable them to stay there.
Yeah, really, really powerful. And the same common themes that come up many times with sustainable tourism, sustainable business. You have to find out what the locals want, what the locals need, and try to balance the economy and local need, the incoming visitor and local need. You need to talk to local people. And with many, many times around the world, not only Japan, the government, somebody in government's deciding for them without ever going there, without really talking to them or understanding, and that creates problems. So that was for me, that was really interesting part of the book, because that comes up over and over again with lots of indigenous rights issues. Lots of issues come from the same stem. So it was really sad to read that there was kind of, you talk about, there is no blanket response that's going to work for everyone, right?
No. And each village has different needs, each town has different needs, each city has different needs. So it is really important to get right there and to understand what it is that people need. And when I give talks about Japan and about the disaster to groups in the UK, I'm very careful to say, look, this is not, don't think this is just the way the Japanese government, don't be under any illusions that the British government, the American government would do exactly the same in the same kinds of situations. They make the decisions. And I think we've got it wrong. We need to go in and say, what is it that you need? Let me try and make that happen. And then it would be great if in these situations there was like a middle person who represented the needs of the community to people who had the financial and practical resources at their disposal. And that, I think, would be a really good way of managing disasters moving forwards.
Definitely. A kind of liaison between official people and local people. And I've seen that work really effectively in Kamikatsu, for example. You have NPO working between the government and the local people. What do the local people need? How can we help them? What do we have government funding? What are the rules? And be a buffer between. And that's kind of the role that you took on. For example, when you went there.
I wasn't working with government people.
Oh, that's
and
true.
So I was the channel with I think with individuals, companies, organizations and schools who had money, and they wanted that money to go to Tohoku. They just were looking for the right kind of thing. Yeah. So I think I was in that way, but I never got any government funding, and I didn't talk to any government people either.
Yeah, that's true. But one thing that made me think you were kind of that kind of role when you were there is when you went and you were talking about there was a lot of clothes that people had donated. And there were people that needed clothes. but there was no one to really organize getting people who needed clothes the clothes from the place where the clothes were. You know,
Yeah.
so you saw that situation and you tried to
Yeah.
be the person to sort that out. And I thought that
Yeah.
was great. I love that part.
Oh, thank you. I think that's a good one to remember because that applies to all disasters. I think before you send clothes, we always think what clothes are needed, don't we? Before you send clothes, you think about who's going to manage them at that other end. And if it's the people within those communities who are trying to get get what is needed to their communities, they go from one need to another very, very quickly, and those needs can change daily. So if you're getting clothes together and then they arrive a month later, but they're on another need, they're focusing on that, those clothes are going to get put away, and at some point somebody might deal with it. But there's so many things to deal with over that long period of time that the people living there probably can't deal with it. So there's a chance that they'll end up being just stored somewhere. So I always want to say to people, please, please make sure there is somebody, you know, exactly the person who guarantees they will get rid of every single item that you're sending before you send anything up, because otherwise they will become a burden.
Yeah. Well, it's such a fun part of the story that the first time you go up, you have 2 truckloads full of things that people have donated from the UK, which you're delivering up to try to find people who need it. And you're not sure who's going to need it or how to find them, but you just kept asking people, "Do you need stuff? Do you need anything?" And then trying to offer them things, and how you were really surprised that people were like, "Yeah, actually I need stuff. Yeah,
Um,
actually I could do with some money." Like that was a real eye opener, right?
I know, because while I was going around England collecting things, this constant drive of I've got to get them there, got to get them there really quickly because they're not going to need anything. And I was so naive, so naive. I mean, people were still needing clothes years afterwards, not necessarily in other parts of Tohoku, but because of the nature of Oshika, because it's so remote, because there are only a couple of shops that survived, because it takes an hour to drive to the nearest shop, which you're using up fuel, and you don't have jobs, then because of the nature of Oshika, actually people did need clothes for a lot longer than we would ever imagine.
Yeah. And you were talking about trying to eat locally, but you don't want to take up too much resource. So you kept trying to find local knowledge about that. You also had cash donations, which you were really happy you had the cash because then when you heard people need fruit and vegetables, then you buy it locally and you take it over to them. What a
Yeah,
great service. And to be able to move so flexibly like that is real advantage of not being a company, not being a nonprofit. You just do it
yeah,
yourself, right?
yeah, yeah. It's I found, yeah, I could just go ahead and just do things really quickly, make them happen straight away. Whereas if I'd been part of an organisation, I would have had to consult with people, and the only people I felt needed to be consulted with, to be honest, were the people themselves, the villagers there. So I can understand that other people work in other ways, and I can understand the benefit of having a group of people that you consult with things like this. For me and that situation, that wasn't going to work.
Yeah. I love that part. I hope I'm not giving away too much for people that are going to read the book, but I love that part when you're first looking for a young mother that you want to give her some diapers and you end up talking to a grandmother and then she grabs your
Yeah,
arm and
I
she
know, I
says
know,
she says, "What do you have?" And then you
I know,
realize, wait, mindfulness, where am I? What do I
I
need
know.
to look around and see the need, right? Like, and then it kind of woke you up. That was really
It did,
powerful.
it did. I still, when I think about that moment, it still made me tear up a little bit. Then you mentioning it, and I remember when I wrote about that part, and yeah, I was so ashamed of myself for not really looking. I this was the first time I went up there. I'd never been to a disaster zone before, didn't know what to expect, and it completely snapped me out of, okay, nothing applies. I went there thinking I need to be kind and gentle and oh poor you, and that wasn't what they needed at all. They needed, you know, bit of lipstick, bright smiley face, lots of silliness. I'm very clumsy, so I end up falling all over the place. I'm not very ladylike at all, and I needed to make people laugh, and also just look and see what is it that they really really needed. And yeah, that moment, it just completely changed how I interacted with everybody on Oshika for the last 10 years, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a really powerful part. And then like so many powerful parts from the book, but also like what you just said, you had been advised people don't need your sympathy when you go up there. Don't put on a sad face. You need to give them hope. You need to connect with them on a real level. You need to see them. You need to find out what they need and make that connection. And I think, man, that is a powerful lesson for anybody volunteering in a disaster zone or volunteering to help people. What a great lesson to learn.
And somebody pointed out that they people get different things from the book, and I find it really interesting. And it's interesting hearing the things that you found that have spoken to you in the book. And every single person that reads it has something different. And somebody said that just those things that you were saying there, just to stop and listen to people and say, what do you need, actually doesn't just apply to disaster zones. Doesn't it apply to all of our interactions with people in general? And we don't do that enough, do we?
No. Just listen.
You can be in an argument with somebody, and why don't we just stop and say, okay, let's just stop this. What do you need right now? And it might be that person just needs to be listened to, or they need you to be more patient, or they need something. They need, but what is it that you need? And just to say that with kindness and with a commitment to wanting to help fulfill that need.
Yeah, absolutely. It's powerful because it makes you realize how preoccupied we are in our daily lives, right? And how, like, you were mission driven. You were going to meet that woman and give her the diapers, and you knew that she needed it. And then you were kind of jolted out of it by that lady saying, well, maybe you can help me. I mean, she didn't say that, but that's what she meant.
Yeah.
Powerful. Well, we have about 8 minutes left. Is there anything we haven't talked about from the book that you'd like to talk about, or what's next? Anything you're working on next?
I suppose the idea of it being 1 month, the title of the book being 1 month in Tohoku, it's not about 1 month. And obviously people read the subtitle, they can see that, but it's about a decade. It's about 10 years in this fishing community and what's happened to them over those 10 years. And it is telling the story of our relationship over those 10 years in order to show what happened to them and their progress and where they are now. And that last chapter is kind of like a where are they now kind of chapter, which I love in films and books. I love to know, okay, let's have a little summary of everybody we've met in the book. And I love that part. So it's about 10 years. It's not about 1 month, but one of the ideas behind the reasons why I called it 1 month in Tohoku was because I loved that idea of all of us just taking a minute to think, if I dedicated 1 month, if I just took 1 month out of my normal life and I dedicated that to something that involved other people, that was something that was entirely devoted to helping other people, what would you do? And I love that idea, and I love hearing about what people think they would do. Gosh, if I took a month out of normal life and all I did during that month was to help somebody else, then what would you do? So that's kind of one of the reasons why it's called 1 month in Tohoku, although it's actually spanning a whole period of 10 years.
I mean, talking about that 1 month, that was wild. Like, even when you went up the first time and you really didn't have like hotels booked or guest house booked or anywhere booked, you didn't have any of your own food. You had like a sleeping bag and you're like, I'll just sleep in the truck. And then even for
Oh,
your 1 month, you're really living like bare bones, really
mm.
basic, freezing accommodation.
Oh,
But your whole idea was, well, I'm not going to put it off. I'm just going to go do it.
yeah.
And wow, kudos. Good job.
Thank you.
It's so easy, right? For people to make excuses and be like, well, they don't really need my help, or it's too hard. But then when you look at the map of how you drove there, and you can drive there in less than 7 hours from Tokyo,
You
right?
can go visit. Go visit. It's so beautiful there. And you can stay. There's not many hotels, but there's one that looks right across to Kinkasan, and it's right on the edge of the peninsula, so you can actually see that direction that the tsunami came in. Which, if people are interested in that, it's okay to be curious. It's okay to be interested in that kind of thing. Um, and just go and stay. It's beautiful. The food's amazing. Kinkasan's gorgeous. There are deer everywhere wandering about, and they eat from your hand. And the shrines are lovely, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful place that needs people to go and visit.
Yeah, it looks stunning. And that was something you said in the book as well when you first went to help out after the disaster. You were struck by how beautiful it was.
I
You
know
know,
it wasn't what I was expecting, and you're looking out to the sea, and it's just stunning. And then here you've got it's a complete and utter destruction. I mean, everything. You just couldn't work out what anything was. I've never seen anything like it in my life. And then here, gosh, but that's amazing. And you had these two, and then the people. So it's the people and the scenery on Oshika. The people are beautiful. They're lovely,
yeah.
really friendly. Love it when people go and visit.
I'd love to go and visit and see the pink fishing costumes that you organized for them with
Yeah,
people's donations. And I'm sure if
yeah.
we name drop Carolyn Pover while we're there, people would remember you or know some stories
Yeah,
about you.
yeah. Well, because I still go back there now. I mean, we talk on Sky, on video call, and on the phone regularly. And every year, I mean, this year, obviously can't travel to Japan this year, but I was due to be there in the summer. I go every year, still for 1 month.
Nice. That's so nice. And to keep your connection, and then to also tell the rest of us about the need so that we can continue to help. You've had some great collaborators within Japan as well, like
Yes,
the Ohana School you mentioned, Tohoku
yes.
International School you mentioned. So there's a lot of businesses and great people in Japan who are also really supporting your efforts and making sure that
Oh,
the
yes.
people there are not forgotten, right?
They're not people. This isn't just a UK connection. The support doesn't just come from the UK. It comes definitely from people within Japan, from Hawaii actually too. There's one Lorna Nagamina. She is been a long term supporter of activities on Oscar. She's in Hawaii, and yeah, this is a network of people from all over the world who provide support to that area. So yeah, it's not just the UK at all, and
That's
still do now. The school uniforms from the junior high school. I think next year will be the ninth year that somebody has sponsored those school uniforms for every student that's going into that school. And no, they're not. It's
that's
not a
awesome.
disaster zone anymore, but they still do need support.
Yeah. And like when I talked to Angela Ortiz, who runs a project in Tohoku, and she's been there for many years doing Santa Soul Train and activities to keep the kids and the families happy and excited, and to know that there are people outside of their area who support them and care about them. And that's so important to make them know that they're not forgotten, right?
Not forgotten yet, that they're cared about, and that there's a relationship that continues. It's going to continue. So it will be different, and there will be different kinds of support. But generally, sending that love and support and friendship to people who are still rebuilding their lives, because they are.
Yeah, that was wonderful. When you visit some of the schools, and then you said you saw some of the letters that the kids in the UK had written, or the kids in Tokyo had written to them, and you see the effect yourself, it's so heartwarming. So it's such a nice legacy that you've helped create from disaster, but making connections with people in communities to help support them and give them hope. It's a really beautiful book. Thank you so much, Carolyn.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining today. And if you have any comments or questions, please write them below, and Carolyn and I will try to get you some answers. So you can always do this, even if you missed the live stream, you can always watch it again. And make sure that you check out Caroline's new book on Amazon, 1 Month in Tohoku. You can also find her on Facebook. There is a Facebook page just for the book, right? 1 Month in Tohoku.
Yeah.
And there's great pictures there and some of your stories, which is nice. And carolinepover.info is your main website. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. It's wonderful you could join and tell us some of the stories from the book. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for writing it.
Oh, thank you very much.
That's awesome. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks. Bye. Thanks, Caroline.
Bye.